It's inappropriate characters.
Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords, and I'm here tonight with Grim Jim and Venture Satanis as usual. Tonight we're going to be talking about the recent scandal involving Zak Smith, aka Zak S, aka Zak Sabbath, aka Pepito Fernandez, about the terrible abuse that he conducted against, or allegedly, I don't want to jump in with my own opinion here, allegedly terrible abuse that he conducted against his long-term girlfriend and some other women, and that those allegations have now come out, and has had an interesting cascading effect on the RPG hobby, where there have been some people that have used this opportunistically to try to attack people that have nothing to do with it, other people who have used it to try to engage in censorship, and generally a whole lot of bad behavior that we're going to comment on tonight. Also, myself and Grim Jim and Venture, we're kind of all on the same general side of this, but we don't agree on all the particulars. So I think there might be some interesting debate.
Sexual abuse is good.
No, oh God.
He's joking.
We
Just
can't
kidding.
take you anywhere, can we? God damn it, Venture.
As you just said we were on the same page, I was like, damn it, I certainly don't want to be on the same page. I want to be on the other page.
No, Venture, it's sexy abuse that's good, and then only with consent.
Yeah. A library completely across town. Sorry.
All right. Well, before we get started, though, I'm going to hand you over to the member of our team that goes on the special bus, Venture Satanis, who has a little commercial advertisement he wants to do before we begin the main part of the program. Take it away.
Well, it doesn't always, or doesn't have to be me or always me, or yeah. Sometimes I do a lot of self-promoting. It's true. So this week I released Thought Police, as in THOT, that hoe over there. I decided a little while ago to just make it a trilogy. So there's Thought Audit, and that was part one, which I released last month, I think. And then Thought Audit, Thought Police, which is number 2. And the third installment is going to come out in a little bit, probably April or something like that. But just want to say that the PDF is online on DriveThruRPG. It's definitely worth getting. I think it's pretty cool and funny and sexy and sleazy. Also, as long as you're supporting us, like and subscribe to our Inappropriate Characters channel and also our Patreon. Check the link in the description below. I think that's it.
All right. Very good. So bringing it back to the main topic of the night, for just in case, I mean, I know that almost everybody watching us must know about this stuff, but just in case there's someone who is not sufficiently familiar with a particular subculture of the OSR or DIY D&D, I guess we should give you a very basic description of what happened here. So Zak Smith is a guy who had kind of jumped onto the OSR bandwagon, although he himself rarely liked describing himself as part of the OSR. In fact, he invented this other term, DIY D&D, as a way to avoid having to associate himself with the filthy hoi polloi and right-wing shitlords of the OSR. He thought himself above all that because he was an artiste and a trust fund baby. So he did, however, end up getting into porn. Strangely enough, the OSR wasn't good enough for him, but porn was. And he ended up making a show, which was his first real moment of fame, which was called D&D with Porn Stars, which was basically just like what it sounds, him playing D&D with a group of porn stars, including one of whom was his longtime girlfriend, Mandy Morbid. Zak was very successful in this show because mostly it had a bunch of porn stars in it, right? And he was the only male porn star. The other ones were all female porn stars and very attractive, and obviously nerds watched it.
If Ron Jeremy had been in his group, I think a lot more people would have watched.
It's true.
Well, probably just to see what happens, sure. But anyways, then he went on to make some RPG products, some of which were associated with James Raggi and Lamentations of the Flame Princess. his games were, or his books were known to be, artistically very avant-garde because he's an artist and he did his art as part of this. Mechanically very gimmicky and had way more hype than what they probably deserved. At least that had always been my opinion of it. And I'm not just making this up after the fact. You can go back and look at my review of his Bornheim book, and you can see that I said, about half of this book is useless because it's just gimmicky. Anyway,
you said that about my stuff too, though. So,
yeah, well, he made some random tables which I think were a little more useful in some cases than some of yours, but in general, you had more stuff, more percentage of your stuff is useful than his. Okay,
that's fair.
So he became well enough known in the OSR. He was one of the kind of two edgy celebrities of the OSR, the other one being myself, that ended up being hired to be consultants on 5th edition D&D. I don't know how much he did because a lot of people were called, there were several of us who were given the credit of consultant. And I know that different people who had that credit did different amounts of work. I have hundreds of emails that I have stored in my account that prove that I was very involved in the production of D&D 5th edition. Zak Smith, after the fact, claimed that he had very little that he did. He just kind of sent a couple of emails and then they paid him. And I think, again, he said that, that might be true. Maybe they didn't really care what he said or not, right? But I think that's also a sign that he said this because he didn't really want to be associated with D&D, right? He's not one of these people that for me, it was a lifelong dream to participate in making an edition of D&D. For him, it was something a little bit dirty, right? To his pretentious heirs. So he went on from there, continuing to be generally an asshole. And at one point when the 5th edition book came out, there was a scandal, Consultant Gate, where a number of SJWs who didn't like him because he'd done porn and argued with anti-porn feminists, and didn't like me because I was a mean cultural libertarian that believed in free speech, demanded that my name and his name be stricken from the 5th edition handbook. There was quite a push for this. There was also a push back. And in the end, our, Wizards of the Coast, Mike Merle said he did an investigation. He didn't find any legitimate allegations against either of us because, of course, what they were accusing us of was of stuff like being, there were people who claimed I was transphobic or racist, and that he was, a harasser that sent abusive tweets to people, especially women and trans people. And at that time, Merles took a look at it. He didn't find any credible proof. There was a whole bunch of non-credible proof because, of course, people were literally making things up. Bruce Baugh pulled the fact that I was supposedly transphobic directly out of his massive ass. And it came to nothing. After that, myself and Zak, and most of the OSR and Zak, ended up gradually becoming more and more distant from each other as he became more of a progressive, more of an SJW, and pushed more and more in a pro-censorship side, where he thought that it was perfectly fine to censor, blacklist, and ban people that he felt personally were engaging in bad behavior, which ranged from everything to, being abusive to women to being, a right-wing person who supported Trump or something like that. And that it was perfectly fine to drive these people out of the hobby. And of course, because of that, I spent the last couple of years being profoundly opposed to him. This is going to be important for later because people are trying to lump me in with him and the rest of us on the, Venger and Grimm too, to a certain extent. So now, last week, it came out that apparently Zak was not clean of all charges because Mandy Morbid, his long-term girlfriend, she'd been, his live-in partner for about a decade, she broke her silence. It's already been, almost 2 years since she separated from him, but now she came forward with a very long detail of accusations that she posted on Facebook and have been reposted in many places. I'm sure you can find it if you do a Google search for it, where she talks about constant emotional, physical, and sexual abusive behavior that Zak did with her during the 10 years they were together, his domineering nature, his controlling nature, his emotional abuse, He basically terrorized her, according to what she said, and also accusations that he sexually harassed or assaulted other women. She included a couple of specific accounts of women that claim that Zak engaged sexually with them without their consent. And as a result of this, there's now been a huge pushback in the RPG hobby of people, of course, of many people jumping to support Mandy Morbid, to condemn Zak. And then, of course, a lot of people who always hated Zak that are now trying to take advantage of that. You have SJWs who had hated Zak at first and then were increasingly agreeing with him as he became more and more desperate to join the SJW club, who are now trying to quickly cover up the fact that they were, colleagues or even business partners of him. People like Daniel Fox, who was literally in business with Zak Smith when the allegations came out. And then you have people in the OSR who are trying to distance themselves from Zak at the same time. As a result of all of this, some companies, none of which are particularly important except one, have officially distanced themselves from Zak or officially blacklisted Zak or his products for sale. The only one that's really important are these. The other ones are all kind of just SJW virtue signaling. But the important one is One Bookshelf, which owns Drive-Thru RPG, who have declared that no future product that has Zak Smith in the credits is going to be allowed to be sold there. And they also indicated that this might not be the only person that they're going to engage in this policy with. And of course, this has been taken by the SJWs to be a huge victory, although some of them feel it wasn't enough because it did not block his previous and existing products that are already for sale there. There's also been a whole new movement of people pressuring for Mike Merles and for Wizards of the Coast to again somehow denounce Zak, and some of them are throwing in that they should denounce me too, even though I have zero allegations of sexual harassment against me, and remove the name from the name of Zak and myself from the player's handbook of 5th edition. So that's the situation pretty much as it is now. You guys, I'll let first Grim, Jim, and Venger give their opinions on the whole, their general opinions on the whole thing, and feel free to add if there's anything I missed in my account. I think I was pretty thorough. But go ahead, tell us what you think, and then I'll tell you what I think. I know that we don't exactly agree on everything, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, do you want to go first, Venger?
Mm-hmm.
I said, do you want to go first?
Oh, no, you go first.
Okay. Right. Given the whole atmosphere of everything around this, I think it's really important to open with the fact that I am not defending Zak at all. I think he's an asshole. I know he's manipulative because he was manipulative with me. See, time was we were both on the same side of this cultural libertarian, censorious SJW divide, whatever you want to call it. And I was always constantly backing him and his girls from the D&D with Porn Stars days up against accusations that were being made against them, and they were getting it from both sides. The kind of Christian right type gamers were calling them degenerates, and the SJW types were calling them problematic. And a lot of these people who are virtue signaling now are people who called some of these girls from these games stupid, or called them out for creating, bad images of women in gaming and so on. So these are people who used to abuse them all the time, and seeing them come out suddenly all concerned is a bit odd. But then Gamergate hit off, and I came out very strongly in support of that. And Zak seemed to want to rehabilitate his image starting around that time, 2014, 2015. And just abruptly out of the blue blocked me from everything. I got hold of him privately, and what he told me was that it just wasn't politic to be seen communicating with me, and it was bad for his image. So he explicitly told me that was the reason he was cutting me off. And at the time, I thought, all's fair in love and war, fair enough. If it helps him out, I won't think too much of it. Of course, now I have a slightly different understanding of what was going on there, perhaps. Now, it's important to note that these are the first serious allegations there have been against Zak. Everything else can be pretty much summarized, up to this point as arguing with people on the internet. He would not let things go, ever. I'm argumentative on the internet, and he's like me dialed up to 11. He's really pedantic, aggressive. He actively seeks out people bad-mouthing him or anyone he considers friends, and he will badger them relentlessly forever. And that's the real reason a lot of people don't like him. He never really went along with their accusations against him before and would vigorously defend himself and defended me against spurious accusations. So I'm always a bit wary going into things like this because I know that false allegations do get made. Not usually something as serious as this, but things like doxing or sending rape threats, which is what was leveled at me. And Zak was actually instrumental in demonstrating that that wasn't what had happened. But the thing for me here is this is an allegation. It's a Facebook post. And I don't think we should completely deep sick someone's career. I mean, he'll be all right. He's got, trust fund baby, and he's got all this other stuff going on. But it sets a precedent where you deep sick someone's career, you memory hole everything they have ever done, everything they've ever contributed. And Zak's work was good, in my opinion. Avant-garde. I liked it, but then I'm one of those artsy-fartsy pretentious types anyway. But if just a Facebook post is enough to completely erase someone and stop products being sold and take their name away from books, and that's a terribly dangerous precedent to set because we don't know what really happened. Nobody really, except Zak and Mandy, know what really happened. And so this seems like a vast overreaction to go at this on an industry level when I would feel much more comfortable if people were individually choosing to disassociate from Zak, rather than this whole memory holing thing that's going on. And some of that, it's self-preservation. People have been banding around lists of missing stairs in the RPG community, and they're including me and Pundit and Venger and others in that list, when all any of us have ever done is argue back. I think that seems to be enough to get you considered an abuser. And then there's something grotesque about them equating online argument with alleged physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. That's just horrendous, and it speaks to the quality of the people and the motivations behind what they're doing. Because I don't think a lot of them actually give two tugs of a dead dog's cock about Mandy Morbid. I think they just see an opportunity to promote themselves and to attack people for wrongthink, or even to self-promote in the case of the Zweihander guy, Daniel Fox. That's grotesque as well. My thinking's been developing on this, and I don't know, but I would disassociate from Zak at this point anyway, because it contextualizes the way he treated me. And if nothing else, I trust Satine. She's a friend. I trust her intuition, and I trust that she knows the people involved. And she's come out against Zak, and that's good enough for me at this point. I just still have concerns and worries about justice by internet mob. It's just deeply concerning. I think we need to pump the brakes, detach a little, be objective, and think. And that's just where I am on the whole thing. Venger?
I would definitely second or third. Backing away from the internet mob and how dangerous that can be and how easy it is to get swept up and get put in the same category, even though, in my opinion, we're nothing like Zak or what he's been accused of. I never really liked the guy, for several reasons, and I think he's kind of borderline insane, and I think that attracts a lot of equally mentally and emotionally disturbed people. And some of it is, it comes across as monstrous, his actions, his behavior, but some of it is probably just next level he said, she said. And they're probably all just assholes and have created this, shitstorm for themselves. Why I don't want to blame the victim. I definitely think that victims at some level have they should have responsibility for not only themselves, but the abuse that is going to continue in the future if something isn't said or something isn't done to stop it.
Right.
That's probably not a popular opinion either. I'm not going to throw Mandy or anyone else under the bus and be like, damn you. But at the same time, I'm not going to go out and congratulate everybody and like how brave they are and whatever. That's just A, not my personality. And B, I'm glad they came forward finally, assuming it's all true. But I don't know. It's almost too little too late. And yeah, now, at least temporarily, this guy's career is in shambles. And I guess I feel a little bit bad just because he is a creative person and he is outspoken and artistic and probably insane. And each of us maybe has a little bit of that inside them too. And nobody deserves, to have their life ruined via Facebook posts. But on the other hand, he made his own bed and now he's got to lie in it. So,
right. And I mean, one of the things that we need to remember about Zach, I get, for example, Grim Jim, back in the old days, he defended you. That's true. He defended you when certain people were making some very nasty allegations against you. And I can understand that you would have an emotional connection to that. But if you go on the RPG site, and I think I've seen it elsewhere too. I think that I don't remember where they found it from, but it was something that was reposted to the RPG site on the thread about this going on in the RPG Pundits forum. You will see quoted image of a post Zach made much more recently where he said that someone like you should never work again in the hobby. You should be driven out of the hobby and that there's nothing wrong at all with people who show this kind of bad behavior to be driven away forever from the community or whatever, right? And he explicitly had you in one of those, named in one of those posts, right?
Yeah, but I'm better than him. So I wouldn't sink to that level, even someone like him. Even
sound like one of the conservatives there. Like, well, I'm going to lose with dignity, and I get. All right, I'm going to talk a bit about real politics here, okay? But I get. First of all, we all know that Grim Jim in particular has never met an outrage train he hasn't wanted to stand right in front of and get run over by. Okay,
they're interesting.
The hottest take that is going to be most likely to have people mad at you, and the hottest take is, oh, let's defend. Let's question whether question Mandy's account and defend Zach's rights or something like that.
Yeah, not Zach. Right, this is important. Not to defend Zach, but to defend the rights of the accused.
All right. But, I mean, we also have to, consider, first of all, nobody's talking about sending him to prison because of this one Facebook post. But when there's an allegation, there's a great deal of difference between some allegations and other allegations, right? If some random person had claimed that 35 years ago, at a party no one remembers, Zach had raped them, I would have a lot of trouble believing that, right? If somebody who is a known ideological enemy of Zach claimed that Zach had sent them pornographic pics of himself and then couldn't produce the emails, I would assume that's a hoax, right? But if someone who was essentially, Zak's wife, like his common law partner for over a decade, makes this very detailed post describing abuse, I think that's a very different set of believability criteria, right? Because you're not talking about someone who hates him or some rando or someone who has much to gain from this at this point. And I understand that it is possible for, in divorce cases or what have you, for there to be accusations made against men that are, kind of just for revenge or for benefit or something like that. But there's also the element that, I've interacted, not very much with Mandy, but I've interacted with Mandy online. And I have every reason to believe that what she's saying is right. And I know other people who've interacted more with them, people who saw them interacting together, who have commented in private to me that at least the part where Mandy talks about how Zak treated her, they saw that happening in action, right? And that's something where, even if that was the only part of it, it would be pretty goddamn disgusting, right? And there's, that adds to the weight of the probability that more of those allegations are genuine. But let's look at this from the perspective then. Okay, we all three of us believe in free speech, and that's a very important detail. We're all three of us anti-censorship, right? So something like this happens. What do the people who are jumping on this bandwagon to try to push censorship want? They want you to go and question Mandy's allegations or defend Zak or appear to take Zak's side so they can say, look at these alt-right Nazi bastards who are defending this rapist, right? And they get to then own the victim, which is Mandy, and use the cachet of that victimhood to claim that anybody who is questioning anything they're doing is pro-rape or pro-abuse or whatever, pro-spousal abuse. And then use that itself as a weapon to bludgeon in censorship. So what's the best strategy to take against this? It's not to question Mandy's allegations or to try to claim that Zak needs some kind of a fair shake that, by the way, he repeatedly said he would never give to anybody else, right? To anyone he didn't like. No, none of those people would ever get a fair shake. He was the biggest hypocrite on free speech because every time something happened to him, he wanted all of us to come to his defense, but anytime something happened to somebody else, he was the first one to condemn them, right? But what you have to do in order to defeat this strategy of the SJWs is to, on the contrary, own the condemnation of Zak, right? Is make it clear that Zak was not one of you. He was actually one of them. Zak has been an SJW for years now, whether or not they wanted him in the club. That's how he identified himself, right? He wasn't, somebody who was in any way right-wing, at least, and he was certainly not a pro-free speech libertarian, and there's ample proof for that, right? And you want to make it clear that what you're doing is defending you're defending Mandy's right to accuse, right? Which is also part of free speech. And you're not here to make a final judgment, but you can decide whether you believe her or not. And for my part, I absolutely believe her. And then you have to stand fast on the defense of free speech and make it a point that anytime the SJWs try to use Zak to impose broad-scale censorship, you point out that what they're doing there is using and weaponizing Mandy and abusing her and trivializing her suffering by trying to claim that, say Grim Jim having posted, mean comments or Venger having made, naughty pictures in his books is exactly the same as Zak Smith abusing a woman for 10 years, which it is not, right? And then you make it clear that anytime they say this, they're making Mandy's claims less credible. They're making the claims of any woman who comes forward with abuse allegations less credible. They're trivializing abuse of women and doing all of this while pretending to be fake progressives and trying to benefit personally by attacking their ideological enemies, using women that they don't actually care about at all. And on that note, you're absolutely right, Grim, that there were a lot of these people. There were people who have now come forward and said, oh, we're behind you, Mandy. We support you. We champion you, who are literally cheering when Mandy was getting death threats because they thought that she was on Zak's side, right? When Zak was using her and she was being given death threats, there were people that were laughing at her, that were cheering the people that were doing it, right? That were saying that she should never, have a moment of peace, right? That were trying to harass her in the hospital because of her chronic illness, right? These absolute scumbags who are now pretending that they were always in the defense of women. No, you weren't. You were absolutely not defending Mandy when you thought Mandy was a loyal partner and participant in a caring relationship with Zak. You're now not defending Mandy in the present. You're just attacking Zak and trying to use Zak to censor everybody else you don't like. That's my point of view on this. And that's, I think, the strategy we have to take.
I don't disagree. But practically speaking, I think I personally am just going to find a better hill to die on. I'm just going to kind of, I don't know. I mean, I tried to wade a tentacle in there, and several times it almost got chopped off. And he's not worth it to me. So as much as I care about all those issues, and I agree with you, I'm just going to kind of let the news cycle just carry all that trash and ugliness away. And the next time something like that happens, hopefully it's not, I don't know how it could be a candidate that deserving. But the next victim that gets, shoved up against a wall by the social justice warriors or whomever, I think that person, I'm gonna step in further and defend with more ferocity or something like that. I just can't
come up for Zak.
Yeah, I just can't drum up the will or feel like any kind of risk to myself is just not at all worth it.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, you have a family, right?
Yeah, and as you know, I'm already. I mean, the deep water I was in like a month or two ago is kind of like it's peanuts compared to this. This is like 10,000 times bigger.
Well, that's the problem. There are going to be people that are going to try to claim that what you do and the stuff you write and the stuff you say is the same as what Zak Smith did, and it isn't.
Well,
right?
Yeah, if anybody said that to myself, to my face, or whatever, or anywhere online where I could see it, I would do my part to exonerate myself because that's just total bullshit. But I'm not gonna not gonna march up that hill just because it's just too.
Well, all right. You let some of our audience.
It's no man's land. There's barbed wire. There's like a Gatling gun out there.
That's what's known as pundit land, my friend. That's where I thrive, and that's where I'm going to be fighting.
And for you and Grim and anybody else that's not Zak, I just but I will attack the people that are definitely going above and beyond with the abuse. Like, for instance, Stacey D'Onofrio, or I can't remember. Yeah. How she came out with a statement for Contessa that was just like basically a Brie Larson.
This is one of the examples of the SJWs trying to pretend that Zak wasn't one of them, right? Because a big part of her statement was claiming, oh, Zak never had anything to do with us, right? Oh, Mandy did. She's our victim, right? But we're behind her. But Zak never had any part in Contessa, which isn't true. We all know that he's a part of it.
I can understand that. That I can understand. That's a very human thing. Like, whoa, I'm gonna, throw up a shield or whatever.
Yeah, but it's the human thing is to say, okay, yes, you know what? he was a part of it, and we were all kind of like ignoring everything because he was a fellow ideological traveler of ours, and we ignored his bad behavior, right?
That's not the thing I have a problem with.
The immoral scumbag thing is pretending that they didn't have anything to do with him.
But this is the other is the toxic white male go-to, is that a strong man? I don't know, but that whole shtick is like it's got to go, because you can't just single out a race and a gender and be like, oh my God, they're so toxic. We got to, get away from them or have our own space. And of course, that eventually leads to, we have to imprison them or put them in camps. And, they can't be trusted.
This has been another interesting aspect of this, I think, the way they've all been turning on each other.
Can I, before you jump in there, can I interrupt you? I've got some comments here from our chat.
Okay, go for it.
Share first. Big Fat Polly, hey, Big Fat Polly, he says they're exploiting these allegations to promote an agenda of censorship and control.
Yeah.
He also says Blackhat Matt, Daniel Fox, Holden Shearer, and Olivia Hill are all scum.
Not going to disagree.
This is all still Big Fat Polly. Blackhat Matt is an alleged abuser. Daniel Fox is a hypocrite. Holden and Hill are literal communists who have engaged in doxing, harassment, and threats, as well as anti-Americanism and racism.
If you're against America, then I'm against you.
Another comment is, I remember Zach condemned James Raggi over a mere photo. What a hypocrite and a douche.
Yeah, let's give it up for Jordan Peterson. I mean, I know not everybody's a fan, but
Canadian
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan, but he does provoke interesting discussions, which is good. But yeah, I was saying.
All right, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah,
I'll let you guys know if there's more comments.
Okay, I felt that another really interesting part of this is the way they've all been turning on each other. So Contessa, which is this online female organized convention, and apparently they do other stuff now. I don't know. I checked out when they were sexist, but they very recently went after Bill Webb's presence at GaryCon.
GaryCon, that's right. Did we not talk about that in our last episode?
I think we did, yeah. So apparently details are scarce, but apparently he did something rude and naughty to a woman while drunk that got him, a campaign to disinvite him that Contessa was very much pushing. And now Contessa and Stacey Delaforno, or whatever her name is, find themselves targeted by other people due to their association with Zach. So as usual, there's kind of the snake eating its own tail. They've run out of enemies, they turn on each other. It's it's just another interesting aspect.
Yeah, well, we're seeing quite a lot of that.
I will be at GaryCon though, so if anyone who's watching this will also be at GaryCon, I don't bite. So
Benjer, you know who else is going to be at GaryCon? Joe Bittman, who was our guest star here once. And Joe is going to be running Lion and Dragon at GaryCon. So be sure to check it out.
I saw that on your blog, which is awesome. And I'll be there running games too. Alpha Blue and Chalt. So yeah, definitely come say hi if you see me. And if you stick a $20 bill in my G-string, know that Grim Jim and Pundit will probably get a third of that each.
That's good to know. No, I'm not. Hopefully, not the same $20. I'm not too keen on where it's been. God damn it! All right, so there has been a lot of people scrambling to try to accuse and counter-accuse other people relating to Zach, right? And we've already covered that there are a lot of these same people that were, basically aggressively harassing Mandy online, who are now pretending to be her defenders. There are also a lot of people who had become buddy-buddy with Zach that are now scrambling to pretend that they weren't, right? And one of these is somebody who was already mentioned in our comments, Daniel Fox, who was he was a professional friend of Zach's in that they were both, self-styled, champion game designers or something like that. They'd both rigged the ENnies system to win an ENnie, and they were both, SJWs, right? Rampant online SJWs that had a habit of trying to attack anyone that doesn't vote the way they do. And besides that, Daniel was working with Zak on his latest projects, on the one that he'd done and the one that he was just starting to do. And now, all of a sudden, when all this came out, of course, Fox was one of the first ones to stab Zak squarely in the back, while at the same time claiming, and this is the funny part, claiming that he had no idea about Zak's long history of being an asshole online, right? He thought Zak was, Mr. Honey and Rainbows, and that they had always, that he had always been a nice guy, and that this came as a complete shock to him, which is obviously utter and absolute bullshit. And I know this because Daniel has been obsessed with attacking me for years now, ever since he got booted from the RPG site. And he, engaged in terrible bad behavior with me. But in the process of researching me, he had to have seen, because he has thoroughly researched me to try to find dirt on me and to post that dirt on me whenever he can. He has to have seen many of the articles from Consultant Gate where I was mentioned in context with Zak and Zak's bad behavior, right? So we know that Daniel is lying. He, besides this, now, tried to jump into the attacks on myself as a way to, in part just because he'll never miss a chance to attack me, but also as a way to kind of distract people from the fact that he was up to his elbows in interactions with Zak Smith until last week, right? And that he was in business with him. He was a business partner of Zak Smith's.
And to promote his own game. I mean, he's worse than you two combined for self-promotion.
He'll never stop promoting his Warhammer clone,
Yeah, didn't he post like countless ads before he's kicked off your forum?
That was why, yes. And when another guy, not me, One Horse Town, who was one of the moderators, kind of called him on it, he sent a very mean private message on the RPG site to One Horse Town, a very outraged private message saying that he had paid for a banner ad and therefore he could say whatever he wanted, right? And of course that is not, by the way, we certainly hope that you will pay for banner ads on the RPG site. It's a great place to advertise your games, but buying a $30 banner ad does not allow you to post links to your product on every single thread, that which was basically what he was doing, right? And then he got pissed. I took his side, and then he decided he was an SJW and started attacking me for my politics. And I think he probably is an SJW at this point. He certainly hated Trump.
He's the guy who wasted, what was it, $300 trademarking D&D Gate and then trying to copyright claim videos.
You and me, at least, I don't know if Venger, he tried to get our videos taken down on YouTube, claiming that he had a copyright on D&D Gate, right? Or a trademark, rather, on D&D Gate.
Yeah, which was bollocks.
Isn't this book like 600 pages or something?
Yeah, I don't know. But the point is that Fox ended up making a list that he has now been sharing on anywhere he can. He's been posting it to OBS, posting it to Wizards of the Coast on Twitter and stuff like that, where he's talking about these people who have been serial abusers of women should be blocked from the RPG community forever, right? And he includes, of course, Zak and Webb and some of the other people who have actually been at least allegedly involved in this sort of bad behavior. And then he includes me and Grim Jim, who have never been accused of this bad behavior. And he just kind of added it on completely callously and in a way that is defamation of our character, obviously, but that is also, again, something that is directly harmful to the cause of anybody who actually believes in, giving victims of abuse the opportunity to be believed in the public forum when they call out their attackers, right? If you seriously believe in that, this is the worst thing that someone can do, is to try to muddy the waters by including people in lists of offenders who have never offended, right? to
That is
make false
ridiculous.
allegations. And it is even worse than false allegations. There are no allegations, right? So it's something that proves that Daniel Fox is a fake SJW. He's a fake feminist. He doesn't give a shit about women. He doesn't give a shit about his progressive causes. The only thing he cares about is revenge on me, covering his own ass with Zach, and trying to sell his shitty game.
I mean, Pundit hasn't even kissed a woman, has he? How could he? He hasn't even like touched one. So I think, yeah, those allegations are.
No, I have had quite a lot of women in my day, Venger. I'm not married, which means I can do so without being scummy, right?
There you go. Yeah, I can't. So all I can do is watch and write Alpha Blue scenarios.
A Thelemite and a sex wizard and a tantrist and all these kinds of things that mean that I get some very weird situations myself, and somehow have managed in 30 plus years of adulthood to not once end up being accused of something like this, right? And and yet you see all of these people who are supposed male feminists, right? That are constantly getting their Me Too moment, right? Where you can just tell that the more that they're using feminism as a way to try to attract women, the more likely they're going to be to harass those women at some point when they feel that they're entitled to sex because of how feminist they are, right?
It is uncanny, isn't it? I mean, Mombot on Twitter has this thread, "Where are they now?" for the people who are anti-Gamergate, and it's just case after case after case of child porn, systemized rape, that guy who used to pretend he was a porn producer, and it's like a dozen or more of them now. And then you look in our own circles, and Zach was acting that way. I think Blackhat Matt McFarland, I think he was trying to act like the woke ally and so on as well. Sean Patrick Fannin,
that's a big story there too, right? With McFarland and what's her name,
his missus,
name now. Mm-hmm.
And Sean Patrick Fannin. So you need to keep your eye on these sneaky fuckers rather than honest assholes like us.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. The honest assholes, because we know that it's tricky, and relationships between men and women, as I mentioned in one of my earlier blog posts, that quote from The Godfather Part 2, they're just things that have been going on between men and women for centuries or thousands of years. It's a minefield, dating. And I mean, when I was dating like a decade ago, we didn't have, we didn't have the Me Too. We didn't have, now I'm blanking, but it wasn't, we had internet dating, but it wasn't like all this other stuff that just like the Aziz Ansari, like that whole, like,
that's so awkward and cringe.
Like, 100%, verbal consent or whatever, or she was like non-verbally, she was like, maybe not. And he should have taken that into consideration or whatever. And I mean,
who was it? Was it
like easier times? And every year, every decade, it just gets harder and weirder and more fraught with peril. And I'm glad I'm not in the dating game right now, because God knows what kind of allegations would be thrown at me if I like brought a tentacle into the bedroom and freaks out. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm the bad guy again.
Back in my day, in the days of yore, when I were a youth and dinosaurs ruled the earth, people took responsibility for these things and took care of it. I mean, we've had incidents in LARP games or conventions or so on, and someone would have a quiet word or give them a shoeing, out back, so they would never do that thing again, or would at least watch themselves. Whereas now, everyone seems to want some kind of external authority to step in, or for something to be codified. I mean, there's a big push again off the back of this to try and bring in these pointless anti-harassment policies to conventions. Now, that doesn't mean that I am pro-harassment. It just means that's the point where you get the law involved. And these policies usually have very little to do with harassment or preventing it. It's usually like censorship and codes of conduct, like you were entering a convent or something.
Yeah, I think that anti-harassment policies would be great if they were actual anti-harassment policies with clear, guidelines, clear rules of what, is or is not allowed and where and when and how, right? But they're almost never that. They're almost always these vague set of rules that are set up in such a way that, the people that want to abuse these rules in order to, get rid of certain people they don't like who haven't necessarily done anything can do so, right?
Some of the conventions that were early adopters of these anti-harassment policies that basically just cut and pasted them from Geek Feminism Wiki, some of them have started to walk it back a bit now, like Dragon Meats really overstepped the bounds at one point, to the point where the convention shouldn't have been possible if they adhered to the rules. They've walked that back a bit now.
Some of these essentially had the rule that if any woman wanted you kicked out of the convention hall, they could kick you out.
Yeah. And all it would take would be one person to be an arsehole.
Yeah, one bad actor.
The poor Jeremy Hambly with Gen Con. I mean, I'm sure at one point Gen Con probably had those rules and codes of conduct in good faith, but then they go ahead and ban Jeremy Hambly because I guess he criticized Anita Sarkeesian being a special paid guest, and then he got his ass kicked outside a bar.
He was insulted and they banned him.
Can't even go to Gen Con. He's been banned from Gen Con, and I'm sure they twisted, because he's not SJW. He's
he put all that effort. He put all that effort into unearthing child predators and so on that had weaseled their way into the Magic the Gathering judges program and so on. Did he get any plaudits for that? Did anyone back him up? No, he got punched.
The people involved, Wizards helped, people at Wizards, I should say, tried to protect the people that he was exposing, or to deny them, Anyway, but there is one area in particular now that we haven't covered yet, which is something that's been a direct consequence of this Zak scandal, which is that One Bookshelf, after being intensely pressured about it in social media, especially on Twitter, announced that from here on in, they will not accept to sell any RPG product that has Zak's name in the credits. They said, and some of the SJWs criticized on them because what they basically wanted was the damnatio memoria, where all record of everything he's done was gone forever. But they didn't go that far, and OBS said that existing products that are already there are going to be allowed to be there. And their argument for this, which is a very interesting argument, is that there were other people involved, and that those people involved should not be punished for what Zak did. Right now, this to me points out the flaw. This is where I have a problem with OBS. And I know that some of my fellow libertarians are like, well, they're a business, they can do whatever they like, except that they're not just a business. The internet has changed all the rules of economy, right? Because we're talking about the internet is not just a business, and nothing on the internet is just a business. It's a public space, right? It's a virtual public space that takes the place of public spaces elsewhere in other, in previous times. And so you can essentially, by banning people off the right things on the internet, you can make them unpersoned, right? In either in specific contexts and specific cultures, or absolutely in every context. In fact, you could probably at this point literally cause someone to, end up destitute on the street if you were able to put enough pressure to make it so that he couldn't, that person could literally not have online banking if you end up pushing it up. That is something that is a really, really serious problem, and that's going to have to be dealt with. Now, do I think that OBS has a right to say, well, we don't want to put products by Zak Smith on our site, right? So we don't want to directly have to work. We're a business, and we don't want to directly have to work with Zak Smith. I think probably they do have that right. But where they don't have the right, it's then jump in beyond that personal choice and their own neutrality to start demanding that other companies blacklist people that they don't like. Because if Zak isn't publishing something himself, what are you going to conduct an inquisition of every company that tries to sell books on OBS to see if Zak has some peripheral involvement, and then demand that they pay restitution or make a public shaming ritual to ask forgiveness or something like that? Like, that's where you slip out of your right as a business owner. Because if I'm a distributor, I have a right to say I'm not going to sell the products that this guy makes. But I don't have the right to say, well, I'm going to take a look at all of your employee list and decide who you're allowed or not allowed to hire, And that's essentially what they're claiming they have a right to do. And this is a very dangerous thing, because also in the, when they made this post, they literally brought up in their little FAQ section about people worried about the slippery slope. And fundamentally, they kind of laughed at that. And they didn't laugh at it in a way like, no, that's never going to happen. They laughed at it while saying, yeah, we're probably going to ban other people too. And what they left unsaid is whether the other people they're going to ban are people who have been credibly accused of viciously mistreating women, or if the people they're going to ban are people who voted for the orange man who is bad, right? Or something like that, right? Like, that is literally they're cheering for the slippery slope. So the question is, what do you think about this, and what do we do about it?
One Bookshelf knows that there's a line that if they cross, instead of appeasing 90% of people and then making 10% disgruntled, it'll flip. And just like when they tried
they tried this before. They tried it before, and they learned very quickly that there's way more of us that will stand up to them than there are SJWs who will try to push them, right?
Like when they tried to, blackball or blacklisted Alpha Blue. There's a lot of people, many people came out and were like, I don't like Venger. I don't like what he's written. I don't like his persona. They don't even like his name. But this guy has the right to have his role-playing game book with, sleazy bits and girls top off, and, that's his God-given right. So let the man have his game. And I think, but One Bookshelf knows that, if they try to go down this political persecution path, it's going to backfire. But also going back to what you were saying, Zak hasn't ever published anything by himself. It's always through someone else. Someone else hires him, he does the work, and then another publisher, puts it out there on One Bookshelf. Yep. So if they only stopped their personal relationship or business relationship between them and Zak directly, then that would basically have no bearing at all. That would have no teeth, and nothing would be accomplished. So I can understand where One Bookshelf would be like, well, anything with his name on it. It puts out like 1 or 2 games per year, and it's not like a huge. He doesn't have a huge output like you and I, where we might put out like maybe 3 products in a month or 2 months.
Well, I put out 1 product a week.
5 years from now, he's going to put out like 6 things, maybe.
But this is
he would have
by the SJWs to do it, to create a climate of fear, specifically so that, for example, other companies that would publish my stuff, because I also never published my own stuff, will be afraid that if they publish my stuff, they'll get censored on OBS, right?
Yeah, and margins are already so thin. It's a real potential problem.
Now, I've heard some people saying, well, the thing that we should just do is set up another company that does this instead of OBS. And I think that's great, but it's not as easily said. It's not as easily done as it is said, right? Now, I have to say, last issue or last episode, Grim, you had talked about how you've opened a little storefront there. And at the time I thought, well, I don't know if that's going to go anywhere. But now it seems like you kind of had, like, by sheer chance, a spectacularly perfect timing, right? Because, If you now try to advertise this and push this as an alternative site, well, that might even have some traction, right? But frankly, the scale that you would need to do it to be able to be a real competitor to OBS, because the thing about OBS, people can buy their books elsewhere. They can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on Lulu, you can buy it at specific company storefronts. The difference is OBS is where you can find stuff you didn't know you wanted, right? It's where all the stuff is, right? Not just stuff that you've gone looking for. And for you to have something at the level where where people can go to your site to do that requires an enormous investment of time, money, and technical ability that not just anyone can do.
Yeah. I have got the site set up, but it was never intended to be a competitor to drive through. That would require all its own infrastructure and so on, whereas I've basically used available plugins and things. I didn't have to be particularly technical to sort it out. Now I have intended it to be a haven for people who've been censored or potentially censored elsewhere, but not to just throw the gates open anywhere to anyone. But then I've been thinking, now that this has all happened, it kind of puts me in a weird position. So hypothetically, if Zak made a new product and came to me saying, can you put this on your site for sale because you've offered yourself up as a haven for censored artists and so on, what would I do in that situation? And I honestly don't know. I mean, the notoriety might be worth something, but probably not. The site would probably be attacked. People would find any excuse they could to take it down. And I don't particularly want to be nice to him anymore because he's been an asshole to me. So
well, there's another factor there too, that there's a difference between someone who is censored because of the art they make or the things they write or because of their political views or something like that, versus someone who has become a pariah because of something absolutely heinous that they did, right? Which is what is really the case with Zak, because Zak was an award-winning game designer for all this time in spite of being an asshole. If his career in gaming is over now, it's not over because of that. It's over because there were accusations against him that most people felt were sufficiently credible, right? As opposed to accusations that he's had for years against him that people felt were not sufficiently credible, right?
Yeah. Well, there's also there's got to be a path to redemption for people. There's a lot of people been talking about this recently. I think it's becoming part of the zeitgeist. But the internet lives forever. So anything you've said or done at any point can suddenly be dug up and used against you. And it doesn't take into account the fact that people change or develop or go to prison and pay their dues to society and come back out or whatever else. I mean, look at Varg Vikernes. He was a black metal musician, straight up murdered someone. He's got an RPG out. He's been to prison. He's paid his dues. He's back out.
But he still has heinous views, right? Like,
the game is not very good, and it's horrendously racist. Yeah, but on the murder side, he's paid his debt to society, if you like, at least within the society in which he lives. So,
I mean, if he had come out of jail and had made some kind of regular product, then that would be a perfectly legitimate argument. Sure, that someone's paid their debt to society, they paid the society, but he's come out of there and he's continued to advocate the most vile ideology on earth, right? So there's that's kind of a particularly complicated case, right?
Yeah, but his work and even something like Fatal, I think they're important cultural artifacts that we can look at and examine. So that's
as a negative example, sure.
Yes,
Save Tibet.
This is despicable. We shouldn't just try to make it disappear, right? We should be able to stand up and condemn it in the free forum of ideas.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point.
I gotta go, guys.
Okay.
My parole officer is calling me, so
All right, Venture. Well, thank you for being with us. Remember, everyone, if you want Venture to get to stay up later and continue to finish off the show with us, support us on Patreon, where we are for now. Eventually, we'll go over to Jordan Peterson's site when it's up. But for the moment, support us on Patreon so that Venture can stay up past his bedtime.
Yes, that's important.
See you soon, man.
See you guys.
See ya.
Right.
Bye.
So yeah, what I'm thinking about, well, like, what do we do about the situation of OBS? I think that what we can't do is just say, well, we should just all go into like a little ghetto, right, and go off to some like corner of the internet where there's like little sales sites that and we seed the mainstream to these totalitarian pieces of garbage, right?
Yeah,
you have to fight for the mainstream, right? If you can create an alternative in the mainstream, that would be great, but that requires an enormous amount of seed money and expertise, right?
Yeah,
and you have to fight these guys. You can't just let them get away with it on OBS, right?
Yeah, but I mean, they've essentially got a monopoly. There's a few other small sales sites. E23, Steve Jackson Games runs that, but they're quite restrictive and censorious in their own way, just from a different perspective. There's the Paizo store, which is a bit clunky and kind of has the same outlook as Drive-Thru is developing, perhaps even more so. So those are smaller sites that aren't really competitors. There was an attempt to create a competitor way back, which was Your Games Now. That took off for a while, but then just the convenience of Drive-Thru and RPG Now just completely blew it out of the water. It couldn't operate. It's kind of like how Steam works for PC games. They completely dominate the market, and it's very difficult to do anything about that. But that's also part of what makes it so important. If they are a de facto monopoly, even if it's just in this fragment of the RPG space, hobbyist, small press, or whatever, if you can't sell through them, you may as well not bother if you're doing PDFs, really.
Yeah, certainly.
So if you're blocked off from that, that's a big deal. That's like not being able to sell on Amazon, or not being able to sell your PC game on Steam or whatever else. I mean, you can scrape by, you can sell a few here and there elsewhere, but if you want to make it, if you want to get a return on your investment of your time and your effort and your money you've put into your game, you need to be able to sell it on Drive-Thru.
Yeah. So, well, what it means, I mean, what this adds up to, at least in my point of view, is okay. They've blacklisted Zak because they knew he was an easy target, because literally everyone hates him now, right? Like, there's hardly anyone that is on his side in any real sense, and they knew that there wouldn't be a big pushback to this. But if they get the idea, or if the SJWs get the idea that they can pressure OBS to now ban other people who have not conducted, violent abuse of women in real life for a decade.
Alleged.
Alleged. Okay. But if they get it in their head that they can do this to other people, to people whose only real crime is not agreeing with the establishment left, then we're going to have to fight back in a big way. We're going to have to make up enough pressure on OBS that they realize that they have much more to lose. Because remember, of course, there's a lot of SJWs, a lot of the ones that are currently, tweeting Wizards of the Coast demanding that they erase, my name from the player's handbook, are people who don't own the player's handbook. And they've said so in other tweets. They said, I don't play D&D, but I think this is horrible, right? So they're people that hate these games anyways, and they're not your customers. You have to stand up for your customers, right? I got some comments here from the crowd. Big Fat Paulie says, remember the uproar over Black Tokyo back in 2015? Big Fat Paulie remembers. Brian Harris says, has Grimm tried to republish his Gamergate card game on Drive-Thru Cards? DTRPG weaseled around when they pulled that product, claiming it wasn't an RPG product. Do you have an answer to that?
That wasn't the reason they pulled it. The reason they pulled it was because of the controversy, and they got a lot of pushback from their customers, who at the time were still branding Gamergate a hate movement and all this other stuff, and they just caved. So it was nothing to do with it not being an RPG, and they never had any problem with any of my other card games or anything, and they were already selling other card games at that point. But I'm not going to try and put it back up.
Weren't they selling products that were essentially on the same theme, but for the other side?
Similar sort of things, yeah. And there's a game on there that uses ripped off artwork that I have reported at least 3 times. Yeah, this is illegal stolen artwork, and they've never taken that down.
What game is that? Let's call them out in public.
I think it's Crack Whore or something. It's got stolen artwork from the Lulu computer games.
There you go. So apparently OBS cares a lot about your political views and whether they should ban you for that, but they don't care about people using
stolen assets. Yeah.
Somebody else said, Aaron RPA says, this is late because I'm kind of far behind, but I'm glad to hear you guys are also upset with the banning of Jeremy from Gen Con. Yeah, well, Jeremy did nothing wrong. You know, he was the victim there, and it's appalling that they banned him.
Yeah, he's another honest asshole.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, he's not necessarily the most politic guy or whatever, but he didn't do anything wrong. He's just vocal. He's got a new website which people might want to check out. Games exclusively or exclusively games. Let me just look it up quickly.
Games, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically meant to be a kind of politics-free website.
Maybe we should try to talk to Jeremy about expanding that into tabletop RPG products.
He's already got a section for tabletop on there. So, yeah, it's exclusivelygames.com.
Well, maybe that's one of the answers, one of the alternatives.
Yeah.
And might even draw in some video gamers that haven't played RPGs or haven't, played RPGs in a long time.
Yeah.
George Whittlesbach, Lorraine McClarion Hoopy says, a crypto-only alternative to OBS just for cyberpunk books. Well, that's exactly the sort of ghettoization we don't need, right? Like it's kind of pointless because this is a culture war. However else you want to look at it, we are in a culture war. And if we abandon the middle ground to the other guys and just go off into our little reservation and sell our stuff there to each other, first of all, that's not really going to be productive for us. And second, it's just going to be a matter of time until they decide to go and empty out the ghettos. We all know where that leads, right? Like the history has shown that. So you can't give up the center ground.
Or at least you have to fight bitterly every step of the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Internet Stalingrad.
Pizza Ready said, I heard Catboy is doing a Q&A here. Pizza Ready, you have heard wrong. Judd Goswick says, Venger's books can only be summoned from pentacles. Pundits' games are so medieval authentic that monks have to copy them by hand.
Tried to think where mine come from. Huh?
Judd Goswick responds to Pizza Ready saying, too soon, Catboy is dead. I regret to inform you all that Catboy is not dead. He continues to somehow escape his inevitable destiny. I plan to do a video in my channel the day that Catboy dies in my DCC campaign. Because it'll clearly be a momentous event important to many of my audience. These are all guys from my channel that are talking about this, and they're talking about my Dungeon Crawl Classics campaign, which is a pretty crazy campaign that apparently has fans. Let's see what else we've got. Dracopole says, you must affect the minds of the monopolists, turn them on to free speech and Americanism. He also says SJWs don't really participate in the hobby.
It's a little unfair. They do.
There are 2 types of SJWs. There are some that are hobbyists first and then became SJWs and so kind of participate in the hobby. And then there are ones that are SJWs first that have basically been entryists into this hobby and all other elements of pop culture, and really don't participate so much as, want to attack and change the hobby, and then wouldn't buy the things that they change it into anyways, right? We've seen this in comics in a very clear way.
They just seem to see any creative enterprise in terms of propaganda, in that it has to convey whatever message it is that they want to convey, and it has to beat you over the head with it. It's
well, this is straight out of the playbook of the postmodernists, right? Where basically everything is part of this kind of neo-Marxist struggle. And so, you're one of the things that totalitarians demand is that you're never allowed to not be involved in the revolution, right? Like everything has to be in the service of the revolution.
Well, to an old school lefty like me, all of this seems like a needless distraction from class war. So,
well, I would, I'm not a lefty, but I would certainly agree that, Marx would have said the same thing, right? He would have pointed out that all of this is a setup because, the SJWs are famously middle class and upper middle class.
Yeah.
The modern SJW movement is an action by the bourgeoisie to try to delegitimize the authentic class struggle of the proletariat, right? And there's no question about it. And it's set up primarily to attack the proletariat and the culture of the working class, because they're the ones that they always go after, right? They want to destroy everything that the working class actually likes.
And it's not that there aren't intellectual traditions in the working class. Anyway, it's just we're probably getting too esoteric for most people.
I don't know. I trust my audience, at least. If you've seen my videos, I go into some pretty deep stuff there while I'm talking about elf game. Big Fat Polly says, if things keep going the way they're going, he says the SJWs will use OBS to push their agenda. First, they'll ban objective criminals like Zak and Varg, and then it'll be free thinkers like Pundit and Grimm, and so on. Eventually, they'll ban hypothetical army men RPGs for promoting militarism.
Yeah, I mean, slippery slope is a fallacy, but I mean, we have seen the slope slip here and there. So, they've already censored some of my material. They've brought in constrictions and bans on certain topics, even being obliquely referenced. Though at the moment they're still considering context to an extent, so it's not fallen yet, but it's just every so often there just seems to be a little nibble away at the edifice of their respect for free expression.
I am going to say one thing, though, is that this is not 2015 or 16. And I think that what we're seeing here is obviously that there is still a lot of power among the SJW crowd, but there is also a lot more pushback than there ever was before. Because if this scandal had happened in 2015, then that would have been a free ride for the SJWs. Whereas here, I've seen that there's been a lot of people calling out these SJWs that have tried to kind of use the allegations that Mandy made and weaponize them to try to push their agenda. Daniel Fox, for example, has kind of, I think, pulled back a little bit on some of his statements now, because what he found was that he underwent enormous criticism for them in a lot of places, right? Where people pointed out his hypocrisy, where people attacked him. On the RPG Pub, which is another forum, there was a long thread where he jumped in there and very quickly tried to change the subject of the, Zak Smith and the allegations against him into, oh, isn't the RPG Pundit awful and we should ban him too? And he just got dogpiled, just absolutely dogpiled by people, a lot of whom hate me, because this is one of these little forums that came up, from people who didn't like that I was the boss of the RPG site and wanted to have a different forum, right? So these are not my friends that were saying this. They're just people that were sick to death of opportunists like Fox jumping in with this sort of stuff and trying to push this sort of stuff, right? I do feel hopeful that the pushback is coming in every time in bigger ways, and that people won't stand for the kind of blatant opportunism that used to just get a free pass.
Yeah, I mean, what was I going to say? We may have unintentionally kind of given the impression that we think that everybody jumping on this is a dishonest actor. And
No.
I don't want to give that impression, so I'm just a bit worried that we did that. There are plenty of honest, good, lovely people trying to figure out what's going on and to do what they think is right. It's just that the people who are exploiting it, the people who are shitty, the people who are being hypocrites, they just really stand out.
Yeah, well, and again, I support Mandy. I believe what she said is true. I've condemned Zak in a video I did in my channel, and you know, I think that it's part of why I am so disgusted at these people is that they're using these allegations that Mandy made. That must have been a very difficult thing for her to do, while actually not caring at all about those allegations and only looking at, oh, how can I use this to increase my side's victory over this, right? Which ties into their trying to pretend that, you know, Zak Smith was some kind of a MAGA hat wearing right winger instead of one of their fellow travelers.
It's it is striking how many people use this facade of wokeness and then turn out to be horrible people, you know. And I hate the fact that all of this shit since about 2010, 2012 for me, so it's been going on a while, has made me so suspicious and cynical, and has made me come to treat the idea of social justice. Just I see those words and it's like, you know, stripes on a wasp or something. You know, the hackles immediately go up, and it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, well, it's exactly the worst consequence of the movement by these people. These people who are basically totalitarians, right? They're from the school of the Pol Pot school of social control, right? That have been weaponizing these people that they don't care about, not just now, but in every other, you know, situation that we've seen. They've been doing hoaxes. You know, we're barely into 2019. There's been what, a half dozen SJW pushed hoaxes. The latest one being the Jussie Smollett case, where he literally hired Nigerians to pretend that he was assaulted by Trump supporters, and nobody in the media questioned him. They all immediately jumped on this as proof of how evil Donald Trump is, or whatever else, you know. And that was after the Covington kids, and after you know, the allegations that BuzzFeed came out, the Mueller report. All these fakes are the fake, you know, people getting their hijabs pulled off stuff, which turn out to be hoaxes. Every time that happens, you know, the Kavanaugh allegations, nothing I think in the world has more effectively delegitimized the likelihood of a woman coming forth with a rape accusation being believed than the falsehood of those allegations, you know?
When Me Too started, it was a good positive thing, I think. And they did, you know,
that was very quickly subverted.
They bagged some scalps, and then it became a witch hunt and j'accuse, and, you know, that was it. All thought stopped. That's why I'm still cautious about these kind of accusations. That's why I insist that, you know, if we're going to punish somebody, we should have evidence, you know?
That's totally understandable that you would feel cautious about it, right? Because like I said it myself in the video where I came out in support of Mandy and the saying that I believe in her claim. I did say that I totally understand how an awful lot of my audience would have skepticism about this, because we live in an age where there have been so many false accusations like this that it's very hard to judge whether one of them is true or not. My personal context in this story makes me believe her, right? But I can totally understand someone without that context would be like, well, I don't know what to believe, because there have been so many times that people have come forward with fake claims, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've had false accusations, nothing so serious as this, obviously, but of harassment and of sending rape threats and things like that, things I've never done. So I know people can lie about quite serious things.
Of course. Other comments on the thread here. Dracopol says RPGs with propaganda messages will have all the vigor and artistic creativity of Soviet realism. Yeah, that's basically true. I mean, that I always think of that episode of King of the Hill, about the Christian rock, right? Where he tells them, you guys aren't making Christianity better, you're just making rock and roll worse. Like this is what I don't understand about taking culture and making it propagandistic, right? That's like the opposite of the actual way you can use culture, pop culture or other culture, art or what have you, to influence the general culture, right? That's automatically going to be counterproductive.
And if you want to put messaging in your games or your books or whatever, there are good artistic ways to do it via allegory, like the X-Men are an allegory for racism in the time when they were.
That's the right way that you could influence culture using art, right? Not the way that we've seen now. And part of the problem is that way requires an understanding of symbolism. And as I pointed out, anyone who's been infected with the postmodern paradigm is literally unable to understand symbols. They can understand semantics, but they can't understand symbols, which is why the left can't meme, right? Because they have it's like a mental block because they can't believe in the power of a symbol, right? They can only believe in the power of a narrative invention, right? They think that there's nothing objectively true, so you can't have that sort of correspondence, that kind of Jungian correspondence that you see in symbols.
Yeah, everything's just surface level. It's very blunt.
Their message always has to be the absolute surface level. Big Fat Polly says, let's be honest here, these SJWs wouldn't have lasted a day in the Soviet Union. Probably true. Yeah. He also says, is it weird that I don't care for the gore books, but I want to play in Grimm's gore RPG? What do you think, Grimm?
I don't think it's that odd. I think they're worth buying just for the art, to be honest. Manning did a fantastic job.
Sounds good. Big Fat Polly also says, if I did play Grimm's Gore RPG, I'd play as Al Gore of Gore, Emperor of the Moon, and creator of the internet.
Well, they have 3 moons, so yeah, you probably could be. We should wrap up. I've got to get to sleep.
Oh, hang on. One more from Big Fat Polly, because now that we've pimped your game, we got to pimp mine. He says, I think I will buy Tales of Gore RPG just for the hell of it. Lion and Dragon was awesome, and I'm glad I bought it back in December. So there you go, guys. Buy Lion and Dragon and buy the Tales of Gore RPG. Pundit and Grimm sell RPG and RPG accessories, I tell you what. Okay, so yeah, that's it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. Please share this video absolutely everywhere. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and click the little notification bell, because you want to be alerted when we're going to do future live streams. Sometimes we're not the best at announcing it ahead of time. Better than on my channel, but still not necessarily great. I've always done live streams without telling anyone, and I know that's bad, but there we are. And if you want to support us on Patreon. If we get more donations, then we're going to do more frequent videos. We could go up to doing 2 a month or more, depending on how much support we get. And we might be able to get Venture to stay up later too. Maybe his wife would allow it.
Yeah, if he beats her with a nice wad of notes, maybe she'll back off.
All right. Anything else?
Just I'll repimp my new site. It's much better for me if you buy from me directly at post-mort.com. Electronic products are there, and there's links to everything else that I do there.
There we go. Currently smoking Europe Acorn and Image Virginia. Take care, everyone.
Good night.